Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Macquarie University's Postgraduate Showcase for Education. My name is Sienna, and I'm a current Macquarie University student and student ambassador. In tonight's session, you'll learn all about how you can become an accredited early childhood, primary or secondary school teacher through our Master of Teaching degrees. For current educators, in our second segment at 6 p.m, we will also discuss the degrees and specialisations you could consider for your professional development. You'll also have a chance to ask our speakers your burning questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. To kick off the session, I am pleased to introduce Dr. Helen Little, who is the course director for our Master of Teaching Birth to 5 Years, and Dr. Janet Dutton, who is the course director for both our Master of Teaching Primary and Master of Teaching Secondary. For our audience, again, please put any questions you may have in the Q&A chat box. But Helen and Janet, welcome. How are you going?
Good evening, Sienna. Good evening, everybody.
Hi, Sienna. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us. I think we'll get straight into it. So if you could tell us, Helen and Janet, what are the key features of our 3 Master of Teaching degrees? Maybe Helen, we'll go with you first.
Thanks, Sienna. The Master of Teaching Birth to 5 Years has been specifically designed for students with a previous degree and work experience in disciplines other than education, who are interested in a career change and becoming an early childhood teacher. So it's a 2-year program of study, but it can, of course, be done part-time, and many of our students actually do that as they manage their family and work commitments. The program's accredited with the CEQA, the Australian Children's Education and Care Quality Authority, which is the national body responsible for administering the National Quality Framework and the accreditation of programs and teachers throughout Australia. This program qualifies graduates to work as early childhood teachers in prior to school early childhood education and care settings, so long day early learning centres and preschools. And throughout the course of the program, students will gain experience working across that age range from 6 weeks, children aged from 6 weeks to 5 years of age, through their 3 professional experience units. And they'll gain, as well as gaining knowledge about child development, working in partnerships with families, which is really key in those early years. Curriculum areas like the arts, language and literacy, STEM, and of course, leadership and management within the early childhood sector.
Yeah, fabulous overview. So essentially, Helen Little is our course director for our Master of Teaching Birth to 5 Years. So that was the first course that overview was just for. Janet, if we could pass over to you, you're the course director for our Master of Teaching Primary and Master of Teaching Secondary. So could you kind of give us a similar overview for both of those courses?
Sure. So whereas Helen has responsibility for the younger age group, here at Macquarie, we actually have Masters of Teaching degree that cover the full span from from birth through to the exit points of the school. So the primary Master of Teaching degree is a 2-year degree. It's a degree for people who want to become a primary school teacher. These are people who already have an undergraduate degree in something else, or perhaps even postgraduate qualifications in other areas. But for various reasons, they've either always wanted to be a teacher and haven't quite made that career step, or they have been having experiences in the education sector and would like to upgrade those qualifications to become a primary teacher. So our primary Master of Teaching is accredited by the New South Wales Educational Standards Authority, or NESA. So when our primary Master of Teaching student graduate, they are qualified to teach in New South Wales and other Australian jurisdictions. And it's a degree that's recognised worldwide. So by and large, you'll be able to teach in most countries. There'll be some steps to translate that degree. It's a degree for people who obviously like younger students. So the primary age group is from about 5 years through to 11 or 12 years. And in that unit, you do 3 blocks of professional experience in schools to try to become more familiar with school practice in schools and experience what it's like to be a teacher in the classroom, and a range of units which are preparing you to think about that transition you're about to make, to cover the really necessary aspects to understand how we can work with the whole range of our students, the diverse students in our schools, and all of the units in that degree are profession connected. So whereas maybe there is, some years ago there was university and then there was school, and one was very practical and one was very theoretical. Now all of our study in our degree is very profession connected, so it's very practically focused. Now the secondary Master of Teaching is very, very similar. It's a degree for students who want to teach in the secondary or the high school part. That's where students are aged about 12 or 13 through to 17 or 18. So we have a number of different teaching areas that you can focus in. If, for example, you're like me and you've got an undergraduate degree in English and history, that's what you could become qualified. It might be that you have a science background or a mathematics background or a business economic background, a whole range of options. And that's what you might come in to focus in those teaching areas. It's also a 4-session degree. It's a degree that, like all of our degrees, can be studied part-time or full-time to suit your needs. We have a lot of students who are travelling in a part-time way, so that our students can easily meet their carer responsibilities or continue to work in existing roles while they transition into the workforce. Like the primary degree, we have 3 blocks of professional experience, a range of very, very key and focused units that are going to prepare our teachers in the master's program to transition to teaching. And we have many, many students who are coming from diverse backgrounds. We've got lawyers, we've got people coming from medicine backgrounds, we've got people who've been involved in all sorts of different careers, and they're all equally welcome. We all want our children to be taught by great teachers. So that's what we can help people achieve in our Master of Teaching degrees.
For sure. So I think one of the things that I was picking up there kind of very prominently is that this course is designed for people who come from all kinds of different backgrounds, maybe work or study. But as it comes with master's degrees, that often means that people are still working full-time or part-time or caring for other people or have other duties outside of study. So could you kind of go in a bit more to what that flexible study mode and online learning options look like? Jana, I may pass it to you first.
Okay, pass to me. Yeah, sure. So at Macquarie University, we're very cognizant that our students have a range of very different needs. Some students want to study in a weekday mode, so come onto campus and attend classes in a more conventional way. But we have a lot of students in our Master of Teaching programs who, as we both said, have other roles as well and are going to transition to becoming a teacher more slowly. So the flexible study, we have many units that are offered in what we call infrequent mode. So the primary, I'll speak about the primary and secondary. I'll leave Helen. I think we've got quite a lot of similarities, but she can point out any differences. We have a lot of units that are offered in infrequent mode, and in frequent mode, students would have a blend of Zoom tutorials that are held in evenings or on the weekend, a couple of on-campus days to work collaboratively and see models of teaching, and then parts of the units would be done by independent learning. So that mode is really suited for students who have other commitments, and a lot of our students engage in that. We have some units that are offered in a fully online mode, but by and large, most of our units are offered in weekday mode or infrequent. And that's the way that our students find they can map a pathway. Some sessions they might do all infrequent, some session they might have a bit more availability, so they might do a weekday mode and infrequent. So there's a pick and choose to navigate a pathway that suits your lifestyle. And that's a really important consideration. We know that allows you to continue to work as you make that move. And that's a really important consideration for our students.
For sure. I think being a student myself, one of the great things about Macquarie generally is that it is very flexible to suit your own needs. Maybe you need to do a few units online, or you want to do a mix of both. So would you say that that's the same for the Master of Teaching both 5 years, Helen, similar offering?
Very, very much so. I suppose the only thing that I would just add to what Janet has just said is that one of the things I think that also happens in the Birth to 5 program is that some of the units, there will be an expectation for students to it will require that on-campus attendance. This typically tends to be the professional experience placement units, some of the curriculum units, because we believe from a pedagogical stance that it is really important for students to be on campus, having those hands-on contact experiences and so on. So, but again, we try to arrange them flexibly, so it might be on weekends, or we try to also in the Master of Teaching, where we do have classes on campus, to schedule them on just 1 or 2 days a week, so that people don't sort of have to go, I've got to turn up, 5 days a week or whatever, that we try to cluster them on, 1 or 2 days, so that if they do have to come on campus, at least it's just that once. Again, as Janet said, trying to facilitate, the experience for those that have, caring and work, commitments.
And to echo Helen, we do the same in the primary and secondary. Make sure we cluster 2 days a week, maybe 3 days maximum. We don't want people to have to, break up their week and to be on campus every day. Interestingly, lots of our students begin thinking that they really have no interest in coming to campus, or they don't want to make those commitments. But very, very quickly, they see the value and the merit of working collaboratively, working closely with highly skilled lecturers and tutors who can really model classroom practice. So that's something here at Macquarie we really value, that expertise that's modelled in our on-campus days. But as we say, we work really hard to make sure that they're maximised and that we don't, we make it work really, really well for our students who have other busy lives. We know they have these busy lives, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And as well as our beautiful campus as well, that if you do come in person, you get to see and use all the facilities too. So I think we're kind of starting to get into a few of the reasons of why choose Macquarie, may it be the flexibility or our beautiful facilities, campus, whatever it may be. But why should students choose to study our Master of Teaching specifically? What do you think that we'd like to tell the audience about what makes us stand out? Helen, I may go back to you for this one to start.
Look, in terms of the Master of Teaching, Birth to 5, I think at Macquarie, we're very proud of the fact that we actually have a very long history of providing high quality early childhood initial teacher education. We can trace our history back to the late 19th century, when early childhood education in Australia first started, with the Kindergarten Union setting up training for early childhood teaching. And that was followed, in the 1930s with the Nursery School Teachers College being set up to prepare teachers for the Sydney Day Nursery, or SDN as they now are, centres. And they then later merged to become the Institute of Early Childhood, which was then integrated into Macquarie University in 1994. So we have this continuous history of well over 100 years now, which we're very proud of. And part of, in maintaining, I guess, that long tradition, early childhood education at Macquarie still represents one of the largest groups of early childhood experts within Australia. And our academics bring a multidisciplinary expertise. So we have people that, have come from being early childhood teachers themselves, but from other disciplines such as psychology, sociology, linguistics, and so on. So, and all of that sort of feeds into, the content and expertise within our programs. All of the academics teaching in the Master of Teaching Birth to 5, and Janet will say the similar thing about hers, they're all active researchers across all aspects of early childhood education. We have the Centre for Research in Early Childhood Education. And so we're really committed to, providing that or generating that evidence about high quality early childhood pedagogy and practice, not only to support the sector as a whole, but certainly to inform our programs and our teaching within our programs. And, in recognition of that, For the last couple of years, we have been named by within the Australian Research Awards as the top institution for early childhood education research. And so our students really benefit from that wealth of research and teaching expertise.
Definitely. Would you say similarly as well, Janet?
Absolutely. With the primary and the secondary programs, we are thoroughly immersed in this rich tradition that our early childhood colleagues bring us. And what we're doing in the initial teacher education space at Macquarie is quite clearly we are a centre of excellence for initial teacher education, and we're recognised more broadly in the teaching profession. We're recognised by our industry and our government partners that work with us. So certainly all of our work that we are doing in the primary and secondary space is framed by this notion of excellence. We are part of some really significant large projects, innovative projects that are really shaping the future of initial teacher education in New South Wales and more broadly. So students who come into our program, some of our students are part of those cohorts. For example, we are one of the partner schools who are working with students who are in a Department of Education scholarship, the mid-career transition to teaching project, which is working with STEM teachers who are coming from other careers. So that recognition from industry and elsewhere really is a very strong reason. And as Helen said, all of the people, the staff that our students encounter, are drawing on so many different areas of expertise, really strong basis in classroom practice. Our students always comment on the fact that they have teachers teaching them who know what it is to be in a classroom and teach. And that's a really important thing. But then we also build into that the research expertise, the cutting edge practices, the embedded technology, all of those things that we know are at the very, very cutting edge, I suppose, of what it is to be a teacher. So certainly that's really, really strong. And then in our Master of Teaching programs, and I know that the early childhood are also really strong in this space, we are working really hard to make sure that our programs, in fact, allow our students to be working while they study. And that's a really important thing. We know there's teacher shortages. We know that our graduates are really in demand. And the students in the primary and the secondary Master of Teaching can become paid teachers in the final year of their degree. And that's something, a pathway we're really actively supporting. So we at Macquarie have a degree that was deliberately designed to allow that to happen, the nature of the units. We have units that allow the students to draw on those experiences they're getting. So that notion of being work integrated is a really important dimension, and one of the reasons why you should really consider Macquarie, because this is the direction that I know the Australian government and various other sectors are really advocating for, and we can be here today and say absolutely we're already doing this. This is a direction that we have already been doing for several years. It's not new to us. It's something that we value. We really do want to break down that division between universities and schools. Or everybody involved in that process are initial teacher education experts. It's not like initial teacher education ends at university. So I think that's that notion that we are a centre of excellence for teacher education, and the fact that we are really, really leading the way with developments in this space is really important, led by the very able staff that we have here at Macquarie. So they'd be my top three, added to, as you said, the beautiful campus and the flexible delivery. But certainly there's some really persuasive reasons why I think that the Master of Teaching and our Birth to 5 degrees are really very, very worthwhile degrees to consider.
Yeah, I think as well, like looking at exactly what you were saying in terms of the emphasis of work integration and getting you ready for the workforce, if not at the end of your course, but during the end of your kind of second year, which is so great. But as well, at all of our degrees, whichever area you're looking at, most of them are co-designed with industry. And that's exactly what you're hitting the point on, that you're prepared for what the industry needs as you're going into the workforce. So that's a great benefit as well. As a student ambassador, though, I speak to a lot of students considering different courses. We often get asked, okay, we know why Macquarie, you've told us that, but what's it like actually being a student? Would you be able to each share 1 to 2 student stories with us from your courses and kind of what inspired them to teach? What was their journey like into the course, and where are they now? Helen, I'll start with you.
Rather than focusing on 1 or 2 specific students, I'd like to sort of, I guess, share a global perspective that I guess captures the diversity of both the students coming into the programs, but also where they ultimately end up. So I teach one of the first semester units in the MTeach Birth to 5. And every year I ask the students to share their background as to what motivated them to study the MTeach in the first place. And overwhelmingly, their responses reflect a desire to do something meaningful after having had successful careers, elsewhere in diverse professions. So we've had people who have been architects and lawyers, engineers, dentists, accountants, business managers, a whole raft of different professions. Some come from, a background in teaching primary and secondary and want to, work with younger children. And often what the catalyst, I suppose, is starting their own family, or perhaps working with young children in other contexts. So, often in extracurricular, activities. So they might have been, a dance teacher or in sports and things like that. And that's prompted their interest in early childhood and, importantly, their understanding of the absolutely, significance of the early years for children's development and learning and well-being. So that's what sort of brought them in. But afterwards, several of the students, they've gone on to things like government positions, with the Department of Education. Some work for local government, coordinating early childhood education and care services. Many are centre directors, so they've moved into those management and leadership roles. And I quite often, when I go to visit our current students at centres, I will come across a past graduate, who is now, in those leadership and management positions. Some own their own centres. And a number of students have gone on from the Master of Teaching into the Master of Research and ultimately progressed to a PhD and an academic career as well. So lots of possibilities.
Yeah, so would you say it's kind of an even split between the people who kind of go off into teaching adjacent fields versus people who go on to become teachers? Like, it sounds like there are so many different things that you can do from that one jumping board, I guess.
Yeah, look, there's lots of possibilities, and they tend to go, I guess, depending on their own individual motivations and interests, to pursue those sort of different avenues. But all those different avenues are certainly open to them.
Definitely. And Janet, do you have kind of a similar story of students going in one direction completely different to what they expected to, or what would you say you would share a student story about?
For the primary and secondary teachers, the bulk of our graduates do go into teaching. Some of them in years hence may move into slightly curriculum-related roles or resource creation roles. But by and large, our graduates do go into classroom teaching. As I mentioned earlier, we have a really diverse range of backgrounds that our students come from, and they're bringing really rich career knowledge. So many of them have been at senior levels in other industries. Maybe they've self-owned businesses. Maybe they've had significant carer responsibilities and are seeking to move into a new, phase of their life. I can think of a couple of stories which I think might, speak to some of the different pathways. So I mentioned earlier that it is possible to work in the final year of your Master of Teaching degree, and I know there's a question in the chat. So yeah, so in a 2-year degree, that means that you can get conditional accreditation in the second year of your Master of Teaching, or the corresponding equivalent if you are tracking part-time. And that means that you can work part-time in a school and study part-time as well, or if some people choose to work full-time and study very part-time and take 4 or 5 years to complete their degree. But we've had one of, I can think of one of our international cohort who was recruited to a school in their second professional experience placement, was able to work in that school during the final year. They've had the most wonderful experiences working in that school. They've recently been given a permanent position to work in that school, very supported in the transition, that would be that's a fabulous career pathway to make that work. And we've had a number of our students go to work in regional areas. There's significant teacher shortages everywhere, but particularly in regional and remote areas of Australia and New South Wales. And one of our students who came to us in about 2 years ago had been a lawyer for many years, came in, has completed her Master of Teaching, did begin working in the final year of her Master of Teaching and combined work and study for the last part of her degree, and is now working in a regional area, thoroughly loving the regional lifestyle, playing a whole range of sports and very connected to the community, and is really progressing quickly in her career. So one of the things that I think that when we tell the stories of our master's students, there is really good career progression. And I know that's quite important if you are making a change. The career progression is really positive because you bring so many skills to the degree. And a number of our students, 2 or 3 years after completing their degrees, are sitting in leadership roles, be that a stage leader in a primary setting, or they could be moving into year advisor, year pastoral care guidance roles in secondary settings, or deputy curriculum leaders and those types of things in schools. So they're really important stories to tell. And we also have quite a number of people who come to our degree because they've been, and I think heard Helen say, engaged in teaching like experiences, and they've gone, actually, I've always wanted to be a teacher. I was dissuaded from being a teacher when I was much younger, but now here I am. And I think that for people considering teaching, I guess I'll speak to my experience. It was a really difficult decision to become a teacher, because not everybody thinks that it's the perfect career for whatever reason, but it's the most wonderful career. And there's not a day that goes by where I'm not enormously thankful. My passion for teaching is absolutely undaunted after many, many years. And our students who come into these Masters of Teaching program, that passion for teaching burns brightly. And that's what you're surrounded by, people who want to teach, who want to learn to be the best teacher they can. And they're the stories that we are surrounded by. We have real diversity in careers, in language backgrounds. I think there was 62 different language speaking in the this year's Master of Teaching cohort. So we had 62 languages represented in our cohort, and we're a very rich, diverse, wonderful group to be going into our profession, and it's so exciting to see that students make that transition.
Yeah, from such staff as well who are so truly valuing teaching as a profession, I think, as well, as a massive thing as well. Being passionate people. But teaching as a profession is very fast evolving. You were kind of touching on it just then in terms of it's rapidly evolving as a career choice. So would you be able to give us some insights into future developments, what you expect to happen, and how our Master of Teaching degrees could equip students with future capabilities? Helen.
Look, I think as Janet just alluded to, there are teacher shortages. There is no doubt about that, and both within the school sector as well, and particularly in the early childhood education sector. So there is a huge demand for early childhood teachers, and this demand will continue, especially in the coming years, as both the New South Wales and federal governments have committed to providing universal access to preschool education in that year or two before children enter into primary school. And so, students coming into the Master of Teaching, and of course our other undergrad programs as well, are well placed to sort of to fill that demand, and ready to fill that demand. So I think, as Janet has said, and as I said before, the profile and expertise of our academics and our research capabilities place us in a really great position to both inform and respond to those new developments within the sector as they as they come at us, and as you say, continually evolving. So, for example, the recent revision of the early years learning framework, which is the curriculum framework for within that early childhood education sector, that involved some of our academics here. So we're, right at the forefront in actually writing those documents, informing the policy, being involved in the policy development in the sector. So we're really well placed to respond to and adapt to those new directions as they evolve.
The big emphasis, I think, of co-working and co-creation with industry, as you were saying, it's a very kind of valuable spot to be in as a student, learning from people who are still actively involved, maybe in industry or research. How about you, Janet?
Echoing Helen's words, it's not a demand for teachers is not going to go away quickly. We have a generation of teachers who are approaching retirement, so there's going to be significant turnover in all of our sectors, but certainly primary and secondary. So whereas previously it was like, there's some schools where yes, they're really short of teachers. No, now that there is really good demand for teachers in every way. And as Helen mentioned, our staff here at Macquarie, we're very much at the involved in those developments. So we're sitting on committees, we're being actively involved with government. So we know what's happening in this space. We are contributing research and our strong voices to that. So that is going to really help our students, but also to all of our programs here at Macquarie in the School of Education are framed by what we call the 5 R's. And that is like a program logic, which we're looking to develop teachers who are resilient, reflexive, responsive, ready to learn, and research engaged. So those 5 R's future-proof our students. So we don't say to you at the end of your degree here, goodbye, you are ready, off you go. All teachers know that we have never learnt to be the best teacher, the perfect teacher. We are always learning. We're keen to know more. We're keen to find new ways. We pick ourselves up when things don't go well, and we explore and we innovate, and we're creative. So that sort of resilience and reflexivity that makes us think about our practice, that's how we can really prepare our students, our master's students, for their futures, to know that they will always need to continue to learn, to know that as a university we continue to be here, they can engage in further study once they've completed and join us in that development of new knowledge. So I think they're the things. There's a lot of talk in the primary and secondary space about shortening the degree length. That's obviously a conversation that we're part of. We're contributing our research towards that conversation. We will obviously be flexible and move in response to government initiatives, but we, as I said previously, we are already really well positioned. We already have work integrated learning patterns and models that we are rolling out. So we in fact, I think, are already very well positioned for any of those changes. And when the talk is around a 1-year degree, it is more like there's lots of possibilities, but we already can offer you a 1-year degree of full-time study, and then you can do a blended paid and part-time work, or you can have a fully blended degree. So I think there's really rich potential for the future, and I'm confident that we will be preparing our students well for whatever the future holds for them in their roles as teachers.
Definitely. Thank you both for such great answers and insights. That brings us to the end of the session of how we can become an accredited teacher through our Masters of Teaching. Thank you so much again. But we are moving on to the Q&A session. So if you, while we were listening to that session, that any questions came up that you may have, please feel free to pop them in the chat box. Now is your opportunity to have them answered by Janet and Helen. And we've had quite a few come through already. So the first question is, please discuss the mid-career transition to teaching scholarship. Do either of you have some background on that scholarship program?
That would be me. So I'm the project lead for the Macquarie mid-career transition to teaching program. Now, this is a scholarship program which is run by the New South Wales Department of Education. Applicants who have a science background or a mathematics background or a computing background in their undergraduate study can apply to the Department of Education as part of this scholarship. Naturally, there's a screening process. It's a competitive scholarship. And if successful, they can come to Macquarie University to do their Master of Teaching, and scholarship winners will get $30,000 at the beginning of their degree. They will have a guaranteed placement in a school during the course of their first year, and then in a school during second year as a teacher, and then $30,000 when they are 3 years into their degree. So it's a total of $60,000, which is a great financial support. But what you get as part of that project is we run an executive mentoring program. So this is what I'm talking about. We're trialing some really innovative work in that space, and we do feed lots of those developments through into our other Master of Teaching. So yeah, so it's people with physics, chemistry, computing and maths are the areas that are targeted in that degree. I'm just going to put the link to that in the chat if that's okay. So I think I've just placed the link in the chat in the Q&A. I'm not sure if I've done that correctly, but I've attempted to.
For sure, we'll try and get that link there. If it's not there already, I can see it now. Perfect. So if anyone was interested in that one, the link is there under the question in the answered section. For everyone else who's interested in scholarships potentially, I do recommend that you go onto our website, scholarships at MQ, that you can search into Google, and there's a fabulous tool that you can navigate all the different types of scholarships that we have, because as Janet was saying, it's a fabulous kind of outcome, whatever amount of money it may be. It's always a great assistance to just have in your back pocket. Our next question is from Rhiannon. Please discuss how placement schools are allocated, in particular for parents with childcare, child daycare, school drop-off requirements to adhere to. Would either of you like to jump in for that one?
I suppose I can sort of jump in the first instance, I suppose. So the placements, we have our will office that are responsible for doing all the placements for all of our students. So they are the ones that will be liaising with schools and with early childhood centres to place all of our students. And the expectation is that, I mean, you are taking your placements on as a teacher. So therefore you would be expected to work the same days and hours as your supervising teacher within the school or the centre. So, you know, I guess, you know, in some ways, you know, there's other things whilst we recognise that they do have to happen. You know, things about, you know, I think dropping off at school and those sorts of things, that as with a work, as with jobs, you know, you have to sort of, I guess, sort of come up with strategies for how you're going to manage that. Janet, have you got any other to add?
Absolutely the same. But one of the things we do attempt always to do is place our students in locations that are as close to home as possible. So students are able to preference, you know, often the placements to choose from schools that make that easier. We have the same. There will be some afternoons that you will be required to remain to attend meetings and so forth. We always work with our students to see how they can tap into their support networks for those couple of weeks during placement. The reason that we do that is it's important to understand the full experience of what it is to be a teacher and working in a school. It's one of the reasons that we do our placements in sequential days. I know that is it creates some challenges, but it's just important to have that cumulative learning experience that happens, to be able to follow students over a series, you know, the children over a series of days and maybe even weeks as the prac unfolds. So we do work really hard to accommodate our students as much as absolutely possible. And we do, you know, we ask you if you've got public transport needs or car needs, and then we actually really look closely. The work integrated learning team, which are the office, the staff that look after our prac, do work really hard to make that work as well as we possibly can. But as Helen said, yeah, it's normal school hours. It's a work placement. So that's the nature of a work placement.
For sure. And I think the take-home message is, if for whatever reason you do have circumstances that you need to ask a question about, this teaching staff are always there to help you with that. So I think it's kind of a situation that you deal with when you get to it. I have a question here about primary teaching. So this will be for Janet from Daniela. Could you please tell us more about the support and training that Macquarie University would provide in preparation for the LANTITE, so the literacy and numeracy test for initial teacher education? And what is the typical success rate for Macquarie University students, if you have that statistic on the top of your head?
That's for all of our students, Helen, isn't it? Lots of our students have to do the land type. Yeah, so just to explain, land type is the literacy and numeracy test for initial teacher education students. All initial teacher education students in Australia have to do this test. It's a literacy and a numeracy test. Yes, we do have resources that will kick in for our students if they need those resources. We've got sample tests, we've got units, we've got support units, we've got a member of staff who is a key support. We have university level resources to support for numeracy. So there are absolutely resources that are available to support the students in those in passing those tests. So those tests have to be completed. There's key milestones that those tests have to be completed by. It varies from degree to degree, but absolutely there is support. But like any test, there's a significant amount of work that just has to be done by the test person preparing the test. But we are obviously have got some really good systems in place to support students who need that extra help.
For sure. Helen, did you have anything to add to that one? Or?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So the land type isn't applicable within the birth to 5 sector. It is only for students who are looking to teach in schools. It's currently, unless anything ever changes, it is not a requirement for the within the Master of Teaching birth to 5.
For sure. Very good tips. For those, another question from Rhiannon. For those looking to cover only one teaching area and who have completed a master levels degree prior, is it possible to receive credit for the remaining 2 subjects that would otherwise be for a second teaching area or electives?
Look, thank you, Rhiannon, for that question. You've clearly had a look at the course structure because you could see, I can tell from your question, you have a good understanding of the course structure. Yes, absolutely. In our secondary degree, we have significant opportunities to reward students who have higher degrees. So if you have an HDR, a PhD, a Master of Research, or a Master of something else, we absolutely can look at RPL in terms of some units that have a research basis, and we are able to look at those units. Some students can, depending on their experience, can get 30 credit points out of the 160 credit point degree. If you've done some tertiary teaching, you might be able to get 40 credit points. So that's obviously something that gets assessed on admission. There is the option for both primary and secondary for recognition of prior learning from teaching experience that you may have in other sectors. Because we're an accredited degree, it is a little challenging sometimes to fully reward that, but we absolutely work to do that when we can. But certainly in Rhiannon's example, the master's degree, yeah, that obviously has in the secondary, much harder to make that work in the primary degree because that's very tightly packed with accredited units it's a little bit harder to do that.
And just for reference, if you do have kind of past credits from different courses, recognition of prior learning is kind of, as Janet was saying, a very case-to-case basis. So if you do have questions about it, you're always welcome to give us a call, speak to future students, and we can help you out and kind of work out what your situation would be. Yeah. We have another question from Evelyn. Evelyn was speaking to a first-year student at Macquarie from their local primary school, and she mentioned that most lectures are pre-recorded and that there's 2 hours of tutorials on site. Is this correct, and why are lectures pre-recorded? Would you say that this is the case for the Masters of Teaching? Whoever wants to jump in.
Well, I'll go because it's primary. Most of our units don't even have lectures because we're using a range of different, teaching requirements. One of the reasons the lectures are recorded, some of our lectures are delivered live and then recorded to allow students to watch them, and we watch them at point of need. So that would be why it's to allow that flexibility, because it might not be that you might be working on a Monday when the lecture is presented. Some of our lectures are pre-recorded for flexibility reasons. There's 2 hours of tutorial on site. If you're studying weekday, a number of our units do have 2 hours per week in the weekday mode. But if you're studying in the infrequent mode, you might have every fortnight, for example, a 2-hour Zoom tutorial in the evening, and then you might have 2 on-campus half days or something. So it varies depending on the attendance mode that you're choosing, and students can map whatever's going to work for them from the timetable.
For sure. Helen, did you have anything to add to that one?
It's very similar in the birth to 5 that. Yes, for having the lectures pre-recorded online, is one way that we can provide that flexibility, that it's one less hour that you've got to turn up for on campus for a class when it's something that can be quite readily delivered in an online sort of mode. And likewise, in terms of coming on site for classes, yes, there's that variability that Janet just said, that if you're in a weekday attendance mode, that yes, you might have 2 hours of tutorial for each of your units, but you might have some online, again, which could be at an evening, or those infrequent classes, typically on a Saturday, for half a day. Occasionally it might be a full day, but yeah, varies from unit to unit.
And quite a lot of our lecture content, that traditional 1 hour lecture is a model that is used in some units, but quite a lot of the units actually work on a flipped learning model, whereby the lecture content might be a series of really short lectures. They might be shorter lectures prepared by a tutor or a unit convener, or they could be professionally recorded lectures from another source. So that notion of the 1 hour lecture, which we had, it has been broken down significantly. So often a lot of us are using shorter lectures to allow a tighter focus and allow students to watch, in short bursts when they have time, and to cater. So lots of different ways that we're working in these spaces.
Yeah, for sure. I'd say as a student myself, it does really just depend on what the unit is, and kind of depending on how that works out in each structure for every single subject. We have someone who has asked a question anonymously. Is it the plan to continue to allow students to enter the Master of Teaching secondary degree for the next few years if they have only met the requirements for one teaching area, but not 2 teaching areas? The person is asking because it might be for a few years before they graduate from their Bachelor of Arts, and they want to plan ahead. It's a bit of a mouthful, Janet.
No. And I know exactly what you're referring. So sector to sector, from the Department of Education to the Catholic sector to the non-government school sector, have slightly different policies around what they require teachers. You can graduate and have a Master of Teaching and be a qualified teacher with one teaching area, with history, with maths, and so forth. There's some teaching areas where it's difficult. For example, not difficult, there's less business studies jobs, for example, that are purely business studies. So that we always recommend, if we can, our business studies to also have economics if possible. But it's perfectly fine to get a job as an English teacher only, or a maths teacher only. And NESA have guidelines around first and second teaching area. So to our anonymous attendee, absolutely no problems to look up what's required. In science, for example, you only need to have a science subject with maybe 2 units in one of the areas, like a physics and a chem. So it might be something that you can track easily into your degree. The same with English and history. A lot of people have an English major and they might have a history minor. So it's not impossible. We certainly accommodate it in our degree. We allow all our students to take one teaching subject through. For employability reasons, there's often an advantage to have 2. So that would be the choice that the student makes, depending on what they want to do.
Definitely. And we've had another question come through from Evelyn, who asks, is there any way that we can speak to a working teacher to discuss about the challenges of teaching primary school versus high school for those of us who can't decide between the 2 degrees?
Absolutely. We have plenty of practicing primary and secondary teachers. So if Evelyn wants to follow up via this channel or via me, I can put her in touch with somebody. My answer to that question will always be around what age group do you feel most comfortable with? And maybe if you're thinking about it, it might be to take a job, a part-time role in a after school setting, in a primary setting, to give you a sense of what that might look like. So it's generally about the age group that you want to teach rather than the subject matter, I think. So, but yeah, absolutely, we've got teachers we can put you in touch with.
For sure. And on a similar note, Helen, some students may be aware of our Master of Early Childhood as well. So would you be able to tell us the difference between the Master of Teaching birth to 5 years and the Master of Early Childhood for those who are also struggling to decide?
Sure, Sienna. Look, I think the key difference relates to that prior study background. for entry into the program. So as I said initially, the Master of Teaching Birth to 5 is for people coming from other professions, other careers, with no early childhood background whatsoever. Or no, having said that, some might have, they might have a degree in sort of something else, but they might have done a diploma in early childhood, and some are working as, at that level within the sector already, but they want to upgrade to being an early childhood teacher. So the Master of Teaching is their pathway, whereas the Master of Early Childhood is for those who already have an initial early childhood teaching degree and are looking to expand their knowledge and professional development by coming back and undertaking further study in early childhood education.
Definitely. And I've got another question here for Janet. How will I know what secondary teaching area I qualify for? And can I complete extra study to meet the accreditation requirements?
Yes, absolutely. So you can know what teaching area requirement you meet. New South Wales Educational Standards Authority, NESA, have the information on their website. We have a link. When you come to apply to Macquarie University, applications for session 2 are currently open, so you're most welcome to join. We provide a link to that in the as part of the application process, so you can establish what you do meet. And if you do need to do some additional study, we do allow students to carry 1 or 2 additional units. They don't count towards the Master of Teaching, but you can study them concurrently while you're doing your Master of Teaching in order to meet those requirements. You just have to have those units finished before you complete your degree. So we have quite a lot of students, particularly students who want to pick up a second teaching area. They might be 1 unit or 2 units shy of meeting the requirements. And yes, that's obviously something that we can advise about. And lots of our students take that pathway.
Definitely. So I guess the take-home message being that if you're interested, come and talk to us and we will help you work out what the best pathway is for you.
Absolutely.
On that note, Helen, what are some of the pathways for early childhood teachers to progress in their career?
I guess firstly at a formal level, in order to work in a centre-based early childhood setting, as graduate early childhood teachers in New South Wales, you will need to be accredited with NESA, the New South Wales Education Standards Authority that Janet mentioned before. And so initially you'll have provisional accreditation, but as you progress in your career and undertake further professional development, you can apply for highly accomplished and lead teacher levels of accreditation. In terms of career progression within the workplace itself, you might begin as an early childhood teacher within one of the rooms, working alongside and mentoring other educators in that room. Then you could go on to opportunities to become the educational leader within a centre. So this involves collaborating with educators across the whole centre, providing them with curriculum direction and guidance and supporting them in enhancing their program and practices within the centre. And then I think, as I said before, in terms of where our students have ended up, you may go on to be a centre director. That involves more of that management role, overseeing the operations of the entire centre. You might go on to work for a larger early childhood organisation or local government, coordinating and providing support for a number of centres that fall, under their management. Again, lots of pathways, that are available as you progress through your career.
So essentially the sky's the limit.
Yep.
And Janet, as our final question for this session, what advice would you give a career changer who would like to transition into teaching?
Go for it. In short, look, people wait a long time, and when we talk, like Helen mentioned, we ask our students when they join the degree, what are your aspirations? What brought you to teaching? What is your motivation? And so many of our students tell us, I've been waiting a long time to do this. And once they hit the classroom and they start to work, the question they always ask is, why did I wait for so long? So I think that there's obviously great joys, and there's obviously challenges in making that transition. We have a very, very strong reputation at Macquarie for the care of our students. Student first, is the mentality, and we really do take our role of professional care very seriously. Our students tell us that, and it's something we set out to do. So go for it. It's a great time to become a teacher. There's some really strong innovative things happening in teaching. We've got some, many more, a lot of more support coming for teachers. So I think it's a really good time. Lots of jobs available, but lots of support available as well. So yeah, go for it.
Thank you so much for the great answer. And with that last question, our session on becoming an accredited teacher has come to an end. Thank you so much to Helen and Janet for your time tonight and sharing your expertise and amazing insights. We'll be starting our second session on professional development for current educators shortly in a few minutes. Stay tuned if you're interested to hear how you can develop your career and progress to leadership and specialist positions once you become an educator. For our attendees, coming up soon are our postgraduate consultations between the 5th and the 16th of June. You can see that QR code up on screen. And if you're interested, you can give that one a scan to book a one-on-one consultation, or through the link in your email to book your preferred time slot. Here you can hear all about your postgraduate courses that you're interested in, especially if you had more questions that we couldn't get to tonight. The postgraduate team are available for all your coursework inquiries. You can contact us on 02 9850 6791 or email postgraduate@mq.edu.au. We very much look forward to supporting your career goals at Macquarie. Take care and good night.
Good night.
Those of you who are sticking around, the next session will start in a few minutes, but thank you so much again, Helen and Janet. Welcome to those who have joined us for Macquarie University's Postgraduate Showcase for Education. My name is Sienna and I'm a Macquarie University Student Ambassador. In tonight's session, you'll learn about the various degrees and specialisations that Macquarie offers for your professional development as a current educator, and you'll also have the chance to ask your speakers your burning questions. We also have Rebecca and Alyssa providing us with live Auslan interpreting tonight. To see them more clearly, please hover over their videos and choose Pin from the choices on the 3-dot menu. Without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Tamara Cumming, who is the course director for our Master of Education, Master of Early Childhood and Master of Inclusive and Special Education, Dr. Sue Silveira, who is the course director for our Master of Disability Studies, and Ms. Tamika Worrell, who is the Director of Research Training, who's here tonight to discuss the Master of Indigenous Education. Again, for our audience, please put any questions that you may have in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Tamara, Sue and Tamika, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Sienna.
Thank you. Thanks, Sienna.
So all of you, thank you again so much for your time this evening. I think we should start off the session by getting a brief overview of the degrees that current educators can take at Macquarie to further upskill in their career. Tamara, can we start with you?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Sienna. So as Sienna said, I look after 3 courses, postgraduate course areas. The first of them is the Master of Education. So that's a fee-paying course for all students, whether you're domestic or international. You can complete it in a year or a year and a half. It depends what entry requirements you come to us with. And there are 2 options to do with Master of Education. You can either do the Master, which is 12 10-point units, which makes 120, or you can do the Graduate Certificate, which is just 4 10-point units, so 40 units. So depending on what you're looking for in terms of your professional development, it can be a really good way to get a taste of research and add that to your portfolio. In general, though, if you do the Masters, which is a really popular option, you do the 4 basic units, one of which is our Indigenous Studies unit and 3 research-oriented units. And then you've got 8 elective units, and they cover quite a wide range of things, but they allow you to pick and choose a little bit. So if you wanted to get into leadership in education, for example, you might take the units that are on leading, also human resource management, management in education, or if you're more pedagogically oriented, you might be looking at designing technology units or bilingualism or assessment. So there's some of the things that you'd find in the Master of Education. And typically for people who want to be moving into some kind of leadership position in a school, in a government department, or those are probably the main settings. And it's really important to say that, I should have said up front, for these three courses, that none of these are teaching qualifications. So these are really for people who might already have teaching for qualifications, are wanting to diversify a little bit or expand their knowledge, but it's not going to give you what you need to be a teacher in an Australian school. So that's our Master and Certificate of Education. Then we have the Master of Early Childhood. And this one, for domestic students, you can access HECS Help, and there's international fee paying options as well. Again, you can do it in a year and a half or a year, depending on what entry requirements you come with. So that what we mean by that is whether you've got an undergraduate degree that's in a related area or not, or you might have an honours or a master's, all of those things, and whether you've got some work experience that's relevant, those things will come into whether you're eligible for the year, or we put you into the year and a half full-time option. So all of these master's degrees, very similar, you know, sort of year and a half full-time if you're doing it full-time, which is 4 units a semester, which is quite a load if you're, you know, a mature age person with life responsibilities and any kind of work. So sorry, to go back to Master of Early Childhood. So it's got that same structure, the same 4 core units as the Master of Education, and then 8 electives, similar sort of idea as education. You can concentrate on working with families. We've got some really interesting theoretical options, current issues in policy and pedagogy. You might like to focus on language and literacy. You might be really interested in current work with infants and toddlers, again with leadership or with science, technology, maths kind of areas. So the electives allow you to tailor the degree a little bit more and make it suit what you're particularly interested in learning more about. And similarly, that would be people who are looking to take on a centre director role that doesn't involve teaching, working with one of the big service providing organisations, a council, working with government, anything to do with early childhood other than being in the classroom with the children. And there are more and more jobs in those sorts of areas, especially at the moment where early childhood is such a hot topic. And then the last degree that I look after is the Master of Inclusive and Special Education. So if you're a domestic student, that's also, you can get a Commonwealth supported place for that, and international full fee paying as well. That one is a year and a half full time, and the structure is 12 core units. So everyone does the same core units. There's no electives in that, but there's a really wide range of units and topics that are covered. So the core units include things like arts education, effective instruction in STEM and literacy, supporting positive behaviour and wellbeing, and designing learning for special education. So although it's not a teaching qualification, it's got a 10-day professional experience component. So people doing this degree, again, might be looking for a leadership role or a role in a school with a special education unit where they're in that more educational leadership role, or they might be working in allied health. You might be working in something like a supported play group, or be a consultant. There's quite a lot of things you can do, and it's a great degree. And that one also has a diploma and certificate level. So that would be so the master's is a 12 unit, the diploma is 8 unit, and the certificate is a 4 unit. So that's a really good option as well for people if they're wanting to add in some specialisation and deeper understanding of inclusive and special ed. So so they're the 3 that I look after. I hope that wasn't too overwhelming for people.
Oh, fabulous. So that was our Master of Education, Master of Early Childhood, and Master of Inclusive and Special Education. So would you be able to tell us a bit about our Master of Disability Studies?
Yes, I will. Thanks, Sienna. And it might be a little bit less challenging than poor Tamara. So I'm only going to describe one program, and it's the Master of Disability Studies. And this master's program has a focus on sensory disability. And when we say sensory disability, we're referring to deafness, hard of hearing, blindness, and low vision. And within the Master of Disability Studies, to be able to cater for that very diverse group of people, we have 3 specialisations. The first specialisation is for teachers who are already qualified with a minimum of 2 years of professional experience, who want to work with students who are deaf or hard of hearing, to become a specialist teacher in that field. So that specialisation is our deafness, hard of hearing specialisation. For qualified teachers who would like to work in the field of vision impairment, we have our blindness, low vision specialisation. And again, that's specifically geared for teachers who are already qualified and have 2 years of professional experience in working in the field of education. That doesn't have to be 2 continuous years, and we certainly look very closely at people's applications when they come in to see what we can do to help them to meet those criteria. I mentioned we have 3 specialisations. The third specialisation is one we call the sensory disability specialisation. And that's a blend of both deafness, hard of hearing, and blindness and low vision. And we get a diverse group of master's students coming through that specialisation. Some of them are qualified teachers who are interested in having that dual knowledge right across sensory disability. A lot of the rest of the group are people who have an allied health background, who are now working in the sensory disability field, particularly people working as NDIS service providers. We also get people working in the general disability sector. And it's a good general specialisation to give the introduction into both sides of sensory disability. And we'll quickly add, our program is fully online, apart from 1 unit of study that has a practicum. We're a little bit different to some of the programs that Tamara's described. We're an 8-unit master's program. Our program can be done in a year full time, quite challenging, as Tamara mentioned, if you have other responsibilities. So that's a bit about the Master of Disability Studies. Thanks, Sienna.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Sue. Now, Tamika, would you be able to tell us a bit about our Master of Indigenous Education?
Thanks, Sienna. So thank you, Tamara and Sue. It's nice to go after the both of you because I can kind of touch on what both of your courses are offering and how ours is a little bit different. So the Masters of Indigenous Education sits within the Department of Indigenous Studies rather than the School of Education. So that's a department that also houses the Centre for Global Indigenous Futures. We prioritise Indigenous voices and we are really understanding about community responsibility. So our Masters of Indigenous Education course is a 1-year, 8-unit course as well that's fully online. So it's completely flexible. For that reason, we see that students are really studying from all over, people living in really rural areas of Western Australia to people that are living locally to Darug Noora or Darug Country, which is where Macquarie University is located. As a completely online course, we find that the strongest thing about it is actually the peer connections that are made and the beautiful relationships that develop. Often people think that this is a course just for Indigenous peoples, but a lot of non-Indigenous teachers are really excited about the course and, do really want to learn a little bit more about Indigenous Australia, as it is a core component of all syllabus and curriculum areas. And as well as for Indigenous peoples, it's building on the knowledges that we already have and getting that qualification to go with it, often supporting roles that students might already be taking in their professional lives as well. Like the other courses we've heard from, we do have students that aren't qualified teachers undertaking the course, and that can be people that are working in various sort of community roles. We often find that education, and particularly Indigenous education, it does feed into all areas of community, and it is important for everyone. So again, that adds a really nice diversity to our student cohorts and what people can get out of our course. As it's only 8 units, 8 core units, it's completely flexible. We find that students really benefit from being able to come in and out of the units as they need. We understand things come up, particularly as teachers. I don't think teaching's ever going to get less busy for our fellow teachers. And, really getting to have a diversity of experiences. We start at the history of Indigenous education, and we look at really cutting edge things like trauma-informed education, global Indigenous education, and Indigenous languages. So it's a really exciting course, and there's lots to learn in it.
Yeah, thank you so much to all of you for your incredible overviews. One of the things that each of you kind of touched on is our mode of delivery, which is quite unique to a lot of students. So would each of you be able to explain how our flexible study mode and online learning looks like for each of these degrees? Sue, I may start with you.
Yeah, sure. So we're really lucky at Macquarie University that we have a great learning management system. And it's been developed from a platform called Moodle, and it's called iLearn. And so this is the way that all of our content is delivered in the Master of Disability Studies. And it makes it easy that you can log in anytime, anywhere, phone, iPad, laptop, wherever you are. It all works, and it works constantly. So this gives you really on-demand education, and that allows our students in those pockets of time that they have to be able to download, access learning materials. It really fits around people's lifestyles well. I've often had teachers say to me, Sue, I will download one of your lectures and listen at lunchtime. Sit outside, listen at lunchtime, and they become these really valuable learning experiences where people can relax, enjoy the content, reflect on what they're learning. And the flexibility also extends through to the way we communicate with students, the way we encourage our students to communicate with one another. So in the Master of Disability Studies, and I'm sure in the other programs, we rely heavily on online discussion. So iLearn provides excellent and very robust systems for discussion forums. Personal dialogue with lecturers as well is an option. So there is a lot of flexibility. If you think of it as on-demand education, there's no limit to any time of the day or night where a student can access. And we all do pride ourselves on having a timely response to students. We really understand what it's like to study at a master's level, the demands that are placed on people, the time of the day and night that people are studying, and the need to be responsive to their questions and comments.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And Tamika, how would you say the delivery is like in the Master of Indigenous Education?
So in a really similar way, we also rely on the brilliant iLearn, which houses all of the various things that we need. Further to that, we're moving towards more flexibility and moving to module-based work rather than week-to-week work. We find that often teachers, particularly, our cohort is a lot of Indigenous teachers, that there's a lot to balance within the school week, and trying to stay on top of content on a week-to-week basis can be really challenging as people are trying to progress through the various units. So we find that a module and workbooks are a lot more feasible for students to work through at their own pace, and we do try to time it nicely with the peak periods of the term and kind of capturing peak assessments around the holidays for our New South Wales teachers, and whatever the perfect blend of our national school holidays may be, we take those into consideration to offer the most flexible access.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. And Tamara, how about for your 3 courses? That's the Master of Education, Master of Early Childhood, and Master of Inclusive and Special Education.
Yeah, thanks, Sienna. And to add on to what Tamika and Sue have said, our Master of Inclusive and Special Education is all online. So there's no face-to-face component in that, but in both the Master of Education and the Master of Early Childhood, most classes would have a face-to-face on-campus option, and that can either be you come to 1 class a week, or sometimes you come once a term. So you come, or twice a term. So you would come on 2 Saturdays, for example, from 9 till 3. And that can be a really great option for people who are working and but also want some face-to-face learning. I think it's important to note as well, if we've got any international people considering postgraduate study, face-to-face and being in person on campus is a really valuable part of postgraduate international experience. And in our Master of Education, in which we have quite a lot of international students, we now have all of the units starting next semester, so starting in semester 2, all of our units, just about, I think, will have a face-to-face option as well as an online option, and then from the beginning of next year, we'll have a face-to-face option in all classes. So I think there's an enormous amount of flexibility across our degrees, considering that it's usually people who are already have qualifications and are looking to add on and are very likely to be working to some extent. So we always take account of that in what we offer and the times of day that they are offered as well.
That perfectly leads into my next question. So why would you say that educators who are current educators should choose Macquarie for their professional development? So these are people who already have a qualification, already teaching. What would you say makes our uni degrees stand out? And I start with you again, Tamara.
Oh, no problem. So I think, there are some things you can look at you can see on the Macquarie website, but and that might be general for all of our master's degrees. So I think in relation to the 3 degrees that I look after, we have a strong research focus in the core units. And that means that as a professional, you're able to really undertake some investigation, even if you're not conducting the research. It gives you the space to really look into a topic of interest to you without having to commit to a research degree. But it's very well structured and it's at a master's level. So it can be a nice way to have a taster if you're interested in research. But, for example, it helps you through how to do a really structured literature review, how to plan for research, how to analyze data. And I mean, teachers in particular would know how much data is part of their work. And being able to make use of research and potentially move to generating their own, I think is a really important part of our degrees. I'd also say I feel very proud that we have an Indigenous studies option that is compulsory across our master's degree and one of the core units. And I really, feel proud that Macquarie University demonstrates its commitment to Indigenous knowledges by including that in our degree as a core option.
Fabulous answer. Tamika or Sue, would you have anything to add? Why Macquarie and why our degrees?
I'll go first if you like. I guess we could be cheeky and say, well, why wouldn't you? But that's not a great answer. So we have been delivering postgraduate education for a long time. And Tamika pointed out that their program doesn't sit within the School of Education, but the programs that Tamara and I are talking about this evening actually do. And that makes us terribly accountable for the product that we deliver to students. So the pedagogical approach that we take to teaching, learning and assessment is highly scrutinised. It has to be contemporary. It certainly has to comply with all of the university requirements. but we are constantly showcasing our skills as educators to our students. So it's something that, you know, that we really value and we put a lot of effort into. And I think from a professional education perspective, we are the experts in our fields. So in the Master of Disability Studies, if I give you that example, all of our academic staff are actually employed by Next Sense, which you might know was formerly the Royal Institute for Deaf and Blind Children. So we all have years of experience working in the sector. We understand the situation for educators working in the sector, people working in the disability area. We've all done it. We understand it. We've worked those hours ourselves and in those locations. So that really helps to enrich the professional education that we deliver. One other thing I would mention too is that we recognise in all of our programs diversity through our student population, and we certainly try and cater where we can for that diversity. And again, if I just refer to my program, and it's not just unique to our program, but we take access very as a really specific and important issue. So in our program, we welcome students who have sensory disability themselves, and we make sure that their journey with us is positive, that they have the access that they need to have a good journey. We work very closely, as the other programs do, with a service on site at Macquarie that is a student wellbeing. And we work closely to make sure that all the adjustments and the needs of students are met, so that that student journey is a good one. So we do like to reflect that back in our practice and in our approach to teaching in every way that we can.
Incredible. I think before I go on to you, Tamika, I think Tamara has something that she wanted to add to that last point.
Oh, that's fine. I could have waited. But I wanted to say something else that I've had the opportunity to do recently is some more professional development in active learning. And I really think the professional development that Macquarie offers its lecturers is a real strength. And I think COVID has in some ways been a gift, because it's allowed us, well, it's forced us to become a lot better at using the online environment. But ultimately, I think that does allow us to serve students better. And I think, you know, I think we're coming out of the transition period now into a time where we're really on the front foot again and able to use the affordances of online environments, and we're being given the professional development to do that effectively. And I can't say about other places, but I can tell you that I think Macquarie does that very well, and there's a lot of pride in the quality of teaching and how we do that, and being up to date in the way that we teach.
100%. I think all of you have touched on it, that we're very kind of focused on co-creating with industry, not only within our courses, but also that all of our teaching staff are still very much involved with the industry, may it be working or through research. But Tamika, if I could ask you, why our Master of Indigenous Education? Why Macquarie?
So I think it's an easy sell, but it's the only course of its kind in Australia. So there's no other university that offers a Master of Indigenous Education. And further, you're being taught by people that have lived experiences as Indigenous peoples, that have all been through the education system, which is powerful in itself. And I know, often when we're debunking myths, people say that they've never met an Indigenous person before, and these kind of things that are quite common even for educators, working to build a really strong knowledge base and unlearning and relearning some things as well. And, why Macquarie? I speak from, I did my undergraduate, I did my master's, and I've just submitted my PhD thesis under Macquarie. And I've had such a wonderful experience as a student and now as a staff member. I think it's an incredible place to build a community, whether that's virtually or in person. We have a lot to offer.
So true. I think as a staff member and student as well, I think that gives you the best kind of testament to how lovely it is. If I could ask you, Tamika, as well, our next question is, what are some recent developments within your area of expertise that would excite our viewers or future students?
Ooh, I love this question, and it's really hard to just pick one thing. I think for our course, I'll say two things. I'll try and keep it brief, but I couldn't possibly pick. I think for educators to be empowered to actually embed Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and thinking. So moving beyond, just the kind of content, delivering content that is about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, but actually bringing in ways of viewing the world, Indigenous ways of viewing the world. I think that's a really powerful kind of forefront that we're moving towards in the education sector. Further to that, I think trauma-informed pedagogy, particularly for Indigenous knowledges, is completely integral. And something that really excites me about our course is that our students do a trauma-informed management plan, and basing that on their workplace as well. And I think that tangible item that can be taken into the classroom is really useful. And we find that often that has a really lovely domino effect into schools as these conversations about trauma and what that means for Indigenous peoples and intergenerational trauma as well. Having these really complex conversations and bringing them into the classroom, for the benefit of students is really exciting.
So exciting as well. And in the only place, I guess, that you can study it here as well, which is great.
Absolutely.
Sue, how about you with the Master of Disability Studies? What would you say is exciting in the field?
So that you could talk about this for hours. Tamika's absolutely right, but I thought I'd raise the issue of technology. And in the area of sensory disability, technology has made an incredible difference for people where access is concerned. In the case of people with deafness, of course, you're probably aware of the cochlear implant device and the change that has made to people's life, giving them access to sound. Within the blindness area, the technology that exists now is absolutely remarkable, and it allows people to have much safer and much more independent orientation mobility. It means that people can do things like access every piece of printed material that exists that they were not able to access previously. So in relation to technology is moving ahead rapidly, and we certainly make every attempt to expose our students to that technology within our program. But then on the other side of it, the non-tech area, another exciting development in the field for people who have vision impairment is you can now learn Braille online. So one of the programs that our staff have been involved in is to develop an online training program. And it's not just for people who need to be a Braille user themselves, but it opens up Braille to those people's families, to the professionals that support those people. And a little while ago, there was a globally accepted format that we're all going to start applying to Braille, and it's called UEB. So the program is UEB Online, so Unified English Braille Code, and that's now just sits in a little modest website that people can log on to and start learning Braille. So that has opened it up to thousands and thousands of people globally to be able to support a person that they know that's a Braille user, for educators to learn Braille prior to working with students, for other professionals, and that's made a huge difference. So I guess we go from the high tech right down to the low tech, but all of these initiatives are making such a difference to the access and equity for people with sensory disability.
100%. And it's so exciting as well, I think, to be involved when that change is happening too, and getting to see it as a student firsthand as well. And Tamara, what about for your courses? What would you say are some exciting or recent developments in your area of expertise?
Yeah, well, following on what you and certainly what Sue have said, Sienna, I think the fact that the people teaching the courses are active researchers themselves in those topics. I think one of the ones that goes across all 3 degrees is leadership, which I think is very solidly now recognised by anybody in education as being a key part of helping education to be successful, that it's certainly what you do as a teacher or anybody working in a setting to do with education has to have that content and pedagogical knowledge, but also these leadership skills. And I think that's something that we're really strong at across those 3 courses. If I can particularly toot the trumpet of I don't know what the beautiful Auslan symbol is for toot the trumpet, but I'm waiting to watch Rebecca do toot the trumpet. I'm just entranced watching Rebecca sign. Is that we have a centre for research in early childhood education, and as a group of researchers in the faculty, we're the #1 in Australia for research in early childhood education. So obviously in that degree, we're especially strong.
Fabulous. And I think you've shared a lot of experiences from, I think, the Macquarie end, the teaching end. But one of the things that I get asked a lot as a student ambassador is, what is it actually like being a student? Would each of you please be able to share maybe 1 or 2 stories with us about the students that kind of go through your course, what their backgrounds are, how those backgrounds may be different, what they studied, and how their study experience at Macquarie helped them into their future careers? Sue, I may start with you.
Sure, yeah, of course. So we try in the Master of Disability Studies to give our students the best student journey possible, but also to continue connections once they become our alumni. And we do keep in close contact. We really encourage our students to become supervisors for our professional experience unit. They're wonderful because they've been through the experience themselves. They're working in the field and they're excellent ambassadors for our program. And so I thought I might just read a couple of quotes, if that's okay, from feedback that we've been given from 2 of our alumni. So our students, to answer one of your questions, our students come from very diverse professional backgrounds. So we have complete novices to the field, right through to people that have been working in the field for many, many years. And I did explain earlier the diversity of professional backgrounds that our students also have. But I think the common goal that we find in our student cohort is that they all come to us because they're interested and want to make a difference in the lives of people with sensory disability. And this cohort of people it's not a huge population, but it's a population that if we support and we support well, the sky's the limit. So there's a lot of passion in our students, and it's wonderful that even though there's that diversity, we go on and see a lot of our students get permanent employment as specialist teachers when they graduate. And one of our recent graduates shared this comment with me. And she went through our deafness, hard of hearing specialisation. And she said, now I'm graduated, I'm in more of a position to affect change for a student. As an itinerant with this master's qualification, and I like this bit, she says, I have the ear of the learning and support team of the school, the principal and the deputy. And as a result, any student on my caseload has a representative, a voice, and an advocate. So I thought that was pretty powerful that they are able to identify those roles. And I do have a comment also from a student who's been through our blindness and low vision specialisation. And she said to me, it's hard to put into words how beneficial the course was for me. It's really changed how I teach, how I look at what the students know and also need to know, and how to go about achieving just that. And she finished up and said, completing this course has just changed everything for me. So I thought that was nice to share with our group tonight, the positive nature. There's no denying the challenges that you'll face studying at a master's level, but it is so worth it. And to hear those alumni now in positions that bring them a lot of satisfaction is just wonderful.
But hearing from those student testimonials, kind of giving them the power to enact change in the roles that they were in before is such a powerful thing as well.
That's right.
Tamika, how about you? What would you say some student stories that you could share?
For me, I think the most exciting stories that I hear are often from our Indigenous students that are undertaking the course from a space where they're feeling a little bit disillusioned by the education system. We know from the research that Indigenous teachers absorb a unpaid tax of cultural labour that we often absorb in the school setting, and seeing students kind of journey from a place where they're quite frustrated with the system to feeling really empowered that there are ways to change, and the word I like to use, agitate the systems and make space for Indigenous knowledges. And that seeing that kind of journey is really, as a Gamilaroi woman, seeing that is really heartwarming for me. And you know, it's just looking at a student quote here, and they said that they left a unit that I was teaching feeling more confident in their ways of knowing and being. And for an Indigenous student to, you know, feel more confident about who they are walking away from the classroom, I think that's a really exciting perspective to share, as well as, you know, seeing that non-Indigenous teachers really being able to amplify the voices of Indigenous peoples in classrooms and school settings where there may not be many Indigenous students, but there's someone that needs to champion Indigenous voices in that school, and those non-Indigenous teachers being able to kind of carry that flag, which is really exciting as well.
Yeah, so again, kind of a real emphasis on empowerment to create change in whatever area that you kind of are passionate about, but may not have felt that you had the space or power to do before, is a really powerful thing.
Absolutely.
And Tamara, what would you say your kind of typical student profile or experience are in your 3 courses?
Yeah, thank you. I feel so inspired by what Tamika and Sue have been, the stories that they've been sharing with us. And I think that's one of the real gifts of being a lecturer working with students in these courses, is that people, because they're postgraduate, people, they really want to come and do this work. And they've usually got a very strong why they want to come and do it. And that, you know, that really gives back to us as well. But the story I'd like to share is of a wonderful student I had over 2 units last year. And this student was working as a teacher in a preschool. It was a well-resourced preschool, but she was finding that there were things to do with being a teacher that she wasn't completely satisfied with in that setting. And so as she was finishing up her master's in early childhood, she was thinking about what else could I do? And I'd been speaking with her and encouraging her to look at roles maybe as an educational leader, because I could see that in her, you know, in her interactions with me in the class. But because this is such an exciting time in early childhood education across Australia, where, like me, she's in New South Wales. She was successful in getting a job in the Department of Education in the Early Childhood Outcomes Directorate. And I was in touch with her just recently as she graduated with her Masters of Early Childhood. And she said that's just going really well, that she felt her degree gave her that extra sort of knowledge that is more than what you think about as a teacher only. So there were things that allowed her that broader perspective to go and work in a policy setting and, you know, feel that you've got what it takes to do that. So that was a really, you know, really pleasing outcome, and I can see a really bright future for her there.
Yeah, fabulous. Well, thank you so much, Tamara, Sue and Tamika, for all of your wonderful insights into our various master's degrees and specialisations that we have here at Macquarie. We'll now move on to the Q&A component for the evening. If you do have any questions that you've thought over the past few minutes, please feel free to pop them in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen and we can answer them live now. Now, the first question that we have is, how can you become a teacher for language? If I could just do a quick wrap up on this one, none of the courses that we're talking about tonight are accredited teaching courses. If you do have an interest in becoming a teacher for language, I highly recommend that you look up on our website all of our different education and teaching degrees, as that's not exactly what we're talking about tonight. And anyone else on the panel, please feel free to jump in if I've got anything wrong there.
Sienna, I was just going to say that person might like to specifically look up our Masters of Teaching, which is different to what I'm talking about. So I don't know what level you're talking about. I'm going to guess maybe high school level. So you might like to look at our Masters of Teaching Secondary is the name of the course that you would look for in the course finder. Or of course, there's the bachelor's options if depending on what your entry requirements are.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tamara. I actually do have a question for you as well. Would you be able to clarify the difference between the Master of Disability Studies and then the Inclusive and Special Education? And Sue, please feel free to jump in as well.
Yeah, and I think Sue did a great job of really making it clear the aspects of disability, the sensory disability that are the focus of the Master of Disability Studies. But I know myself, when I became involved in managing this degree, I thought, isn't this the same thing? It's not. And I think for people who are looking at these two degrees, I think what stood out to me when Sue spoke was that it's very much about teaching in those settings. And Sue, please correct me if I get any of this a little bit not right, and particularly in deafness and blindness. So that the very and sensory issues. So a very particular focus, parts of disability. The Inclusive and Special Education course is more about, I guess, not the people who are necessarily doing the direct teaching of young people with a disability, but giving you a lot of information about the benefits of inclusion for everybody in education, and learning about what kinds of barriers there can be and how to help overcome those, but also the sort of the social, cultural, political, economic environment and environment factors that the particular things. So it's quite detailed and very focused on how we can overcome those to include everybody, regardless of their level of ability in education settings. So it might be, for example, that you're an occupational therapist and increasingly you're working in an integrated way with other professionals, but you don't really understand education because your specialty is occupational therapy or speech pathology. Those two in particular might be people who would be interested in a certificate of inclusive and special education to add on to their own qualification. Psychologists, or I think Sue might have given an example of people working in the NDIS. Again, really, really valuable and very large workforce that could benefit from further professional development in these courses. And again, that there's the 4-unit certificate, the 8-unit diploma, or the 12-unit masters. So it's very flexible in that way. But Sue, how do you see the differences? Is there anything else you'd say that really is the difference between our courses?
Look, I think really the message that you've discussed and one that I mentioned earlier is that we are mostly training teachers, qualified teachers, to develop those specialist skills. And as Sienna rightfully said, it is in the sensory disability area, so blindness, low vision, deafness, hard of hearing. And those qualifications allow people to have membership with the peak bodies, the 2 Australian peak bodies of specialist teachers in sensory disability. We also do, of course, talk a lot about inclusion and inclusive education within our program. That's one of our defining themes that runs through our approaches to the way that we're teaching. But we really are getting down to what are those specialist skills that a teacher needs to have to ensure inclusion and access for a student with sensory disability in that classroom setting.
Fabulous. I think that it's a very good distinction between two. Yes, Tamara.
Sorry, I was just going to say something I think that's also worth mentioning about the Master of Disability Studies. And what we can offer as a university is some pretty exciting buildings that are going up in Sue's part of the campus. Sue, could you maybe talk about that and how that could, you know, be exciting for people?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that Next Sense offers our Master of Disability Studies in affiliation with Macquarie University. So the academic staff are employed by Next Sense, the degrees conferred through Macquarie University. And at the moment, we are relocating to the Macquarie campus, which is really exciting. So that will be all of our academic staff, all our continuing professional education staff, but also our schools, our preschools, our therapy services, our alternative format production services, anything that is to do with Next Sense will be coming on site. So we've got a beautiful facility being built at the moment. It's been a little delayed because of weather and COVID and building material shortages and all of those things that, you know, that get in the way sometimes. But we're hoping certainly by the end of this year that it'll be fully functional. And I mentioned that we'll have schools and preschools on site, and we're really looking forward to the opportunity to work closely with other programs to be able to offer experiences in education and therapy in sensory disability. Things like offering students from other programs practicum or professional experience within our schools are things that we're being considered. It also opens up a lot of opportunity for research and collaborative research with centres across Macquarie University. We already collaborate very significantly in the hearing area, and we're hoping to grow other areas. So thanks, Tamara. That was a great segue into discuss our move, but we certainly will be part of the Macquarie campus, and it's a really huge step for us, but really exciting one.
Sienna, it also reminded me, and I neglected to mention this, that we also have on site MUSEC, which is the Macquarie University Special Education School. And that's a place where people who do the certificate, diploma or masters of inclusive and special education are able to do their professional experience. So that, you know, that's on the grounds as well. But also just listening, Sue, to what you're talking about, I just think there could be great opportunities with Tamika's area, you know, mutual and our own, but that'd be fantastic to see some more connections that way. But I know we're very excited to have Next Sense on campus and to learn from our colleagues with all of that expertise.
Tamika, did you have anything to add to that? Because I know our campus does have some quite unique and gorgeous features about it. Would you like to share anything else?
I see it's such an easy sell for our local students, but I'm conscious that we have so many our degrees, lots and lots of interstate students. But I think something that's really special about what we offer is that you do join a community, and it's a virtual community. And the Centre for Global Indigenous Futures, you know, goes beyond just what is available in the land known as Australia, but we do consider Indigenous peoples globally as our Indigenous relatives. So having those two-way learning opportunities, we often have visiting scholars coming to our campus, you know, whether they're speaking about Maori perspectives or First Nations Canadian perspectives. Having that global learning opportunity, I think, is really powerful. And I think something that's also really exciting, which I meant to touch on earlier, is that we often see students go down the research pathway after doing the Masters in Indigenous Education. So we're a very research-focused department, and particularly for students that are really passionate about kind of going down the policy route of, you know, tackling all the things that we can improve in education, so we support students into our Masters of Research and PhD programs, which is a really nice pathway to kind of develop your knowledge in the coursework and work your way towards a different type of degree. And our research unit really ties that in nicely.
For sure. You're kind of just starting to answer my next question, so I'll ask you first. What would you say are some of the opportunities for continuing education after that they finish a master's degree? So you mentioned going on to research. Do you find that most of your students tend to do that, or what would you kind of say is typical?
I think we often see that, students will often self-elect an interest in research, and we do see students that have these brilliant leadership capacities, and we do have these really lovely yarns with those students about what they're interested in the future. But I think we often see, for most of our students they're already in a school in some capacity, that we do see students taking on that leadership role. Often taking over leadership positions, particularly in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander education space. That looks different in each kind of sector in each state on what those positions are called, but we definitely see a lot of growth and leadership from students that move on from a classroom teacher role that happens to also be responsible for Indigenous education responsibilities at a school, but into more of the roles that have more autonomy and more power to implement change.
For sure. How about you, Sue? What would you say that a lot of your students tend to do study-wise after they finish your course?
It's again very diverse, but of course we work hard with students to foster leadership, to recognise the leader within. When you support people who are in the minority in a population, we have to be constantly stepping up, speaking up, advocating, and that's messaging that we certainly do practice within our program. We're very pleased when we see students go on from our program and do higher research degrees. So we've had students go into the Masters of Research, which is another Macquarie program, which is a wonderful segue into a PhD. We have students that we're working with. We develop those relationships when they're with us, and we continue that higher research degree supervision and support. So that's something that's exciting. We also, and again, this would be, I'm sure, the case across all of the programs that we're talking about. The people that are teaching our students are leaders in the field already, by nature of their professional experience, the paths that they've chosen. And so it becomes a natural thing that we introduce our students to those really essential networks, those professional networks that are available, encouraging students to become members of associations and peak bodies that support sensory disability, and always fostering that idea of becoming a leader where possible. So I think that's something that really helps a lot, having leaders in the field working with our students to really encourage them to go on and become the next leaders.
Fabulous. And Tamara, how about you for your courses?
Yeah, thank you. I just think that's so wonderful. And I think we are good at that at Macquarie, seeing not only the real world application, but also advocacy as part of our role, and our role in empowering our students to be advocates in whichever field they're in, and particularly in these sorts of areas. I think what I was going to say is, it's quite common for people in Masters of Inclusive and Special Education and the Masters of Early Childhood, because there's a certificate and or diploma level, that people will start with that and then want to build on it. And I think for a lot of people who are maybe coming back to study after a bit of a break, or very aware that they've got other responsibilities, that they don't want to commit to something that they can't finish. So they might like to start with the certificate. You can graduate the certificate and then think, oh, I think I would like to go on. And so then you can do the next 4 units and graduate with a diploma. So it really builds one on the other. So it's not like you've got to, if you do the certificate and then in 3 years you decide you want to do the diploma, that you've got to start again. We're very good at building those courses on top of each other and giving recognition for prior learning and things like that. So I'd say within courses, the progression after finishing one course is quite often to build further on it, or maybe to go sideways into something else that we offer that people are also interested in.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for that last question. That does bring us to the end of our postgraduate showcase for education. Thank you to all of our speakers tonight for sharing your knowledge, expertise, and insights. I really appreciate it personally, and I'm sure all of our viewers did as well. Also, thank you so much to Rebecca and Alyssa for providing us with live Auslan interpreting tonight. For our attendees, coming up soon are our postgraduate consultations between 5th to the 16th of June. If we didn't quite get to your question tonight, or this session has left you wanting to find out more about our postgraduate courses, you can book a one-on-one consultation with our team through the link in your email or scan the QR code on screen to book your preferred time slot. The postgraduate team are all available for any of your coursework inquiries. You can contact us on 02 9850 6791 or email postgraduate@mq.edu.au. We very much look forward to supporting your career goals at Macquarie University. Take care and good night. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Have a good night.